Go ahead and get started. Welcome to Senate Commerce Committee. We will start with the request for bill introductions. Do we have any bill introductions? Seeing none, we will move on to our reports for today. The first is the Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund. Melissa Rooker, Executive Director of the Cabinet, is here to give us a report. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We appreciate your service as a member of the Children's Cabinet, the Senate President's appointee, and I appreciate the invitation to address the committee today. We have prepared written testimony that gives background about the Cabinet role and statutory responsibilities, and I've provided our annual report for 2022 so that we can streamline testimony today and not dwell on the bigger context, but hone in on issues related to economic development and workforce that relate to childcare in particular. But I do want to say that if anyone has any follow-up questions, I am always happy to be a resource to come talk about the Children's Cabinet one-on-one or in other settings. So just wanted to put that out there. So that's really the first part of our testimony. What I want to point out is that the Children's Cabinet, the one key role that we play per statute is to serve as the agency that identifies barriers and gaps in service across multiple state agencies, because that is one of the issues I want to talk about today. The Cabinet has been the state lead for a collaborative effort that involves DCF, KDHE, KSDE, and our Cabinet team. Since 2018, under then Governor Collier, the state applied for a federal program called the Preschool Development Grant, Birth to 5. So we used a one-year planning grant to do a comprehensive statewide needs assessment of the early childhood care and education landscape, which is spread across all 4 of our agencies and then some. That report is available online, as are subsequent annual updates to the report. We used the needs assessment to create a 5-year strategic plan for early childhood that we are calling All In for Kansas Kids. And that is relevant because all of that work was conducted in 2019, so it's pre-pandemic information and planning that was then utilized once we were dealing with the public health crisis and the conditions that created as we, as a state, received federal pandemic relief funding for specific programs that the individual agencies have to administer. Our strategic plan and the baseline needs assessment served as a framework from which we were able to put plans in place to address issues that were, as we were issuing crisis relief dollars and then recovery dollars and thinking about how we emerge from the pandemic, it really helped keep us on track so that we didn't veer too far from what we had originally envisioned and could utilize those one-time funds in ways to shore up the system. In our needs assessment work, we identified that we have a workforce issue within the child care system itself. The child care workforce is aging. 45% of child care providers in 2019 were over the age of 50 and indicated 56% had been in the field for over 15 years and were indicating that they were planning to retire out in 5 years. So we know we have a workforce that's aging out, and the recruitment issue, how we bring people into the system was one of the big projects that we've been working on. So we have created the toolkit to create a pipeline for recruitment and retention. We certainly have had for some time high school CTE programs. We have been included in the Promise Scholarship, so we appreciate the legislative work to put that in place because it gives high school kids interested in the profession a place to go if they want college course credit. It makes that affordable. We have developed a toolkit for providers to help with their professional development. We have a defined career pathway now that did not exist before. So there is substance to the work that needs to be done through certificates and other types of continuing education. There is a pathway that shows the progression through career in childcare. We have developed or are developing an online resource, a workforce registry for childcare workers, so that we can bring the process of being licensed into the 21st century with digital processes, online processes that make it easier so that people don't have to inspect the paper records. We can track things in a more modern way. We have worked across the multiple agencies. We wrapped KBI and the Law Enforcement Association into a project to make it easier for child care workers to receive to give their fingerprints, to go through the fingerprint and background check process, to lessen the time it takes to get those results back and get hired on or maintain a job in licensed care. That has helped tremendously with the backlog, because prior to this effort, which we rolled out statewide in the fall, people were having to put fingerprints on paper cards and mail them in, and it just added undue time. We have deployed pandemic relief dollars for sustainability grants to help keep doors open. We have improved the subsidy rates that parents receive in that program to help deal with the cost of care. And we are hard at work implementing a number of these projects. We recently, December 28th, we were notified that we've received a renewal of a new one-year planning grant that will help us. We had the original one-year planning grant to deliver these resources. We've had a 3-year implementation grant to help underwrite the cost of the infrastructure costs to start things up. And now we have a new planning grant for 1 year, $4 million. We will use that to assess where we are and where we need to go. And that most likely will play a part in the project that the governor rolled out through her executive order, which is to analyze the governance system across the multiple state agencies and come up with a plan to be more streamlined and effective at what we do in the space of early childhood. The other note that I want to make is the Children's Cabinet is on the receiving end of $20 million from the SPARK committee process, which we very much appreciate. Those funds reflect the first bucket of funding, to use the terminology SPARK process used. It's the first form of funding that we've been able to use to provide construction grants to build additional physical spaces or do major renovation. So last fall we went out to Mineola and held community conversations. We had 10 small communities at the table. They all brought situations. In Mineola, theirs was the acquisition of a church that was no longer being used as a church. They purchased the building and then got the estimates from contractors for how much the upgrades would cost. That's the type of thing. There's not been money heretofore that we could offer to help the community with some of those expenses. So we'll be able to give grants for construction that will be married with another round of funding that DCF has transferred to the cabinet for oversight. And Madam Chair, this will be an agenda item on our February 3rd cabinet meeting agenda. So this is all very new information since our last meeting. But we will, on the front end for the public, there will be a single application process. We will ask for a construction budget. We will also offer the chance for them to put in for major startup capital to help ensure we're not building pretty buildings that nobody has a program to run. So we want to make sure we are braiding together funding for both purposes, so we help launch successful programs in communities that have demonstrated that need. On the back end, we'll be drawing from a couple separate funding sources. So we're trying to streamline and simplify that process. We're trying to help communities grapple with the need for additional childcare capacity. And it's really tagging on to the economic development progress that we've made as a state. As we see these major projects unveiled, Hilmar Cheese and Panasonic and Schwann's becoming the frozen pizza capital of the world, and on and on and on. It's statewide. We're seeing that we have major new employment opportunities, but the new workforce will also need childcare. So this is two tracks. It's developing the workforce of tomorrow by giving them high quality programs and options for their the children to be cared for in, but it's also dealing with today's workforce and the needs they have for childcare to be able to report to work. The problem is we're competing in those communities with entry-level wages for those brand-new projects that are, rightfully the state doesn't want to incentivize a company that's not going to pay good wages to the employees. So those are negotiated as part of the deal, but then we end up competing against these projects that have entry-level wages that can be at least twice as much as what childcare workers earn. Most childcare does not provide benefits of any paid time off, health benefits, retirement benefits. That is not a thing that childcare typically provides. So we are struggling to ensure that we can address those issues in the same process. And I think what we have learned from the work that we've been engaged in over the last 4 or 5 years is that there is not a one-size-fits-all solution that is top-down. So we have really pioneered a community-driven approach to things. 1/3 of our preschool development grant dollars in the 3-year implementation grant we granted to community projects so that we could test theories and gather data and information and understand what works and what doesn't, and let the communities drive the solutions from their level up rather than us imposing a decision top down. I'm going to stop there because I know last week in the House Commerce Committee we had a very good discussion and there were lots of questions, so I want to leave plenty of time for committee members to ask away.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate all the work you do. It's been very educational being on the cabinet and learning more about the efforts. I have a real quick one to kick things off while committee members think. So we have these construction grants, but we also have a problem with staffing. So what is the plan to make sure when those facilities are ready, they will be staffed and ready to offer those services?
That is the rationale behind the transfer from DCF. We can use that money for training programs, and it can be used to offer differential pay scales and wages that, some supplements. So if we need to provide some scholarships to cover the cost of training, if we need to cover match up to enhance, to incentivize certain care models, we can use those funds for that purpose. We can use those funds to, there have been some really good training models that different communities have submitted. And I would also flag that that's part of the issue of community-specific problem solving. Some communities have the space, they don't have the staff, and that is the problem. Other communities have neither, and in some places, we've been helping Phillipsburg. They led a community effort a number of years ago to convert a convenience store into a childcare center that is gorgeous. They've got a new employer in their community. They over the last couple of years, staffing was an issue, so we were providing some of our grant funding to help them do some training things and programs. So that is one example where it was the staff, not the facility, but we see all sorts of iterations of those issues. So we're trying to be nimble enough to bring some state-level support to match up. That is the other key. The cabinet always looks for local match and community partnerships. So we are a big fan at the cabinet of public-private partnership as the model.
Great. Questions from the committee? Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for all you do. I just want to compliment you. Childcare is a huge issue all over the state, but in our area, it's big. And we had 3 communities that we were having difficulty getting childcare and getting it open. And with your assistance, with their help and their persistence, we were able to open all 3 of them. That was a huge benefit to those 3 communities, and I appreciate your work, and so do the people of those 3 communities especially.
Thank you, Senator. It was my pleasure. It's why I've handed my card out in addition to our annual report. It can be complicated understanding where to turn to get the assistance that's needed to unstick a project. It isn't always one place. It's not always the licensing end of things. It could be the fire marshal's office. It might be DCF. It might be any number of layers of our system, which is far too complex to be user-friendly. So I want to invite that I can be a point of contact. I will not be the problem solver, but I can be the connector that helps all of you with constituent services as the need arises, because I know how important that is. It is a matter of making sure that when it takes multiple agencies communicating or signing off on things, that is just an extra layer of coordination you don't always see in certain sectors. It's easy, people do it a lot, they blame over-regulation. What we have found over time, and what we are engaged in as part of our planning grant, we offered some consulting assistance to KDHE to assist with a comprehensive childcare reg review. So that is underway. They accepted that offer. We are delighted to be teamed up. What we will deliver as quickly as is possible is, first of all, something of a matrix that shows the federal level. There are federal safety regulations and federal childcare regulations that must be adhered to as a condition of the Childcare Development Block Grant, which is worth major dollars and underwrites the child care subsidy program. We have our own state level. We have the fire marshal's office. We have KDHE with child care licensing. We then have local zoning codes and different local codes that can be more restrictive than the state. So we've put in process a review. We've put a call out for information from the network of licensing surveyors. We will put this all together so that we can get a clear understanding of federal, state, and local. Sometimes it's the zoning at the local level that prevents someone from opening a child care in their home because they live in a zoned residential community, and that community doesn't want to waive that zoning for even for childcare. So we need to understand, and it's always a matter of plugging in the requests, the need to streamline the administration, the implementation sometimes is complicated. And I will note, Secretary Stanek has initiated conversations with the State Fire Marshal's office. This was begun in the fall, and it will continue around training, cross-training of inspectors, so that we can break down sometimes it's silos where each side is inspecting for their list of things, and sometimes that can be, interpretation can be in conflict. So there are ways we can adjust and streamline. The other piece that we are undertaking is a comprehensive review of the whole package of childcare rules and regs, because we do know there are some things that need to be updated for federal compliance purposes around the safe handling of food and a couple of things like that. We are also looking at the ratios. We are looking at the overall requirements and wanting to make sure that we do address things that need to be cleaned up. And there is a list identified of things we can do better.
Okay, thank you. We have 2 more questions in about 5 minutes. So Senator Dietrich, then Senator Ware.
Thank you, Melissa, for being here. Great information. So the $20 million for the construction and capital enhancement grants, you did a presentation a little earlier, and you had mentioned that you had $90 million in requests. How did you, I didn't ask this question then, but how did you prioritize those?
We haven't yet. So it was $95 million worth of requests, project submissions through the public portal for project ideas last year. There were over 90 million that were coded to childcare facility construction. We have not yet begun the process of prioritizing. We are required to comply with ARPA requirements to open a public competitive RFP for these funds. There are certain technical things that the application has to include that public portal did not include. So we need more detailed budgets than were submitted. We need a lot more information. So our charge is to reach out to every entity that submitted an idea in that process last year to make sure there is full awareness that this is an invitation. We also, I think our starting point, and we'll lay this process out in a little more detail next week for the cabinet, we're going to ask for the public to submit letters of interest so that we can upfront get a read on what still is out there needing money and what does that demand look like. I worry 20 million, like there were, Dodge City had a $20 million proposal. I think Riley County has a $24.5 million proposal. There is no way that, we want to be able to do good in more than just one community in the state. So we're going to have to figure that out.
Okay, I want to get in 2 other questions, Senator Ware, then Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been hearing in some folks' minds that the easy way to take care of the child care is to just adjust the regulation and say that we can have more kids per staff, that ratio is the magic answer. What do you think about that?
So we already have providers who don't want to, who choose not to take as many children as they are allowed to take. That is choice. That is their decision around the quality of care that they think they can deliver. In other states, we see providers leaving the profession because they just, there's already low wage, no benefits. It can be, you have lots of babies and toddlers, and it can be stressful. So we want to be careful not to do things that have the unintended effect of pushing providers away. But I would boil it down this way. The regulations exist, especially the ratios, for safety reasons. So imagine that you are the responsible adult for a group of infants. They're not ambulatory on their own. Fire breaks out. Those ratios are the state's statement of how many babies they think, or toddlers or whatever age child, one adult can gather up and evacuate a burning building. Right now we say 3 infants per adult. We are entertaining a move to 4. I think that's the current regulation that's in process, 4 infants to 1 adult. I don't know about you. I think in an emergency, I might be able to grab 2 in each arm, but I don't know. And that is where we have to balance safety and quality of care with the business side.
And finally, Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Melissa, thanks for being here this morning. I've always looked at, as being a small business owner who's who hires employees and basically trying to satisfy the customer and make sure that employees be able to, focus on doing that. I think this is a huge economic development issue, and everybody else in this room thinks it is too. No big surprise there. I would just ask a couple things as you go forward to this, and I do need to learn more and dig in more, obviously, but just, I think it's important that for existing private care providers out there, we look at them as being our first go-to. Because you're right. I mean, to me, when you have people wanting to do this already, we don't want to give them the impression that we're trying to put them out of business or whatever. And quite honestly, I think that's the most friendly for our employees, is being able to work with their own, who they want to do. The second thing I would ask is that as you roll out these centers, and you talked about the millions of dollars each thing wants, I would suggest you look for ways to bootstrap and not go down building Taj Mahals in a couple places. I liked your idea about you renovated this building for that or whatever. That's the way we need to go with this. Once you determine that you have an area that does not have the private, I think you need to find ways to convert existing infrastructure. Okay, do this Band-Aids and baling wire while not ever jeopardizing the care of the child. The third thing I would ask is that I don't want this to turn into be something that's subsidizing established large businesses that are already in business, okay, that have already received benefits, okay? They need to put skin in this game, especially if they have employers, okay? To me, if there's going to be a subsidization of this, and every economic development tool, it's subsidizing somebody. So what I want to be sure is, since our dollars are scarce here, I want to be sure this is going to primarily, okay, those smaller companies, much smaller workforces that really have a hard time ramping up to find people. I want to be sure they are the first targets of this, and maybe developing some more cost share opportunities for those larger, more mature industries. Otherwise, I don't see this being effective. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and I know that's a 30-minute response, Director, but
I think
would you
I-
like to respond
Quickly, I
Yes, please.
understand. That is part of the model. The community-level partnership has to include local government, the local business leaders, economic development authorities, chambers of commerce. I have been, since fall, the Kansas Chamber invited me to speak to their membership. Other local chambers have included us in their conversations. We have really good business partners in the state that understand that and are willing, have already contributed in certain communities, matching some of the local some of the local ARPA dollars have been matched by large employers in those communities. So we are hoping that our funds will be gap-filling funds. I think it's the only way it works.
Thank you, and I know what a passion the Dolly Parton Imagination Library is for you. Would you like to give it a 30-second plug for all of us parents and grandparents out there who might want to know how to get connected?
Yes, thank you for that. Dolly Parton's Imagination Library, the Children's Cabinet is the state-level partner, and we use Children's Initiative Fund dollars, which are tobacco dollars, to match 50% of the cost with local affiliates that have to be 501c3 nonprofits. And I do have potential legislation to create the state-level nonprofit entity that we will discuss at length. The program is beautiful because it is open to any parent of a child from birth to their 5th birthday. One free book a month is sent in the mail. It's age appropriate. They're high quality books, and we have most of the state covered. I do have a map that has a few gaps. Our goal is to fill those gaps as early in this calendar year as we can to get to a full. Any parent in the state that's interested in signing their child up can. It is purely voluntary, but it is a lovely program. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, committee, our next presentation is by Andy Schlapp, who is no stranger to the committee, but again, continuing this theme of workforce development, he's going to give us an update on Wichita State's workforce development initiatives. Welcome, Andy.
Is on now. You know, if that lights up like that, then it's on. just so the people know that. Two things, and this is really about, when we talk to you or our federal delegation or our local city and county elected officials, there's really two things they want us to focus on, and that is, what are we doing to grow the economy? And growing the economy, what are those industry sectors we can bring to our community and our state that are going to create jobs for our citizens, right? So that's really where we wake up every day and focus on anything that we do at the university, make sure we're asking those two questions and addressing that. And from Wichita State's perspective, just so you understand this, we're the only university that's growing. We grew 5% last year. We've grown 12% in the last 5 years. Also, as we get into applied learning, which is really what I believe is the secret sauce of what we do in partnership with industry, we had 8,000 students last year in applied learning opportunities with over 600 companies and a payroll of $28.5 million. So it's about half of the people that attend Wichita State are actually in a working environment while they're going to school. And just one last little piece that I'm just going to add now, 47% of the people that go to Wichita State are first-generation students. So these are people that have never gone to school before, first in their family. And we believe that these opportunities really are life-changing and improve the outcomes for people of Kansas. I'm going to end up talking a lot, more than you guys want me to, and you can stop me anytime, please. But really, the focus is going to be on three areas. What is the infrastructure investments we make? Where do we bring applied learning models to help grow the workforce? And third, the understanding that when you talk to every cluster, the 7 major clusters that employ people in Kansas, they're all focusing on one area, and it's digital transformation. What is the investments we need to make in capital to be able to compete in this new environment? But more importantly, where is that workforce coming? Because it's not sitting in those companies right now. And so how do we adjust and deal with that? So Forbes just had an article come out. As we talk about infrastructure, Wichita State is now one of the top 20 R&D research, engineering research universities in the country. That's with Johns Hopkins, MIT, we're number 20 at $174 million in engineering R&D. This year, our R&D in engineering is $270 million, so we'll be going up in that list. And honestly, we just signed a contract with the DoD in Detroit to be doing digital transformation on the ground fleet for the Army, and that was another $100 million contract. So we're seeing a lot of good things happening because we're focusing in these areas that are going to make a difference for Kansas. Fortune magazine just had the chief innovation officer from Deloitte write an article and talked about what was happening at Wichita State and said the key for every university is applied learning, and that students are going to need more than the traditional degrees that they've been taught for the last 50 years, that they're going to have hands-on experience with companies to understand what the workforce needs of the future, and ended up writing an article about what's happening at Wichita State and why Deloitte decided to open a building and an innovation center on our campus. And the last
Mr.
thing
Schlapp, can I stop you there just a second? How many have seen that article from Forbes? My question is, why not? Why isn't that being touted? And can we get a copy of that for the committee?
Yes, I was hoping to have it today, but yes, I will get it for you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Please continue.
I like to talk about it more than give you the facts. No, just, we can get that. And the last thing is Lawrence Journal World wrote an article, I think a couple days ago, about what was happening at Wichita State. And one of the things they said is it's because of our aviation focus, and it is, right? Aviation is critical to South Central Kansas. It's critical to Kansas. But more importantly, what we're really doing is focusing on digital transformation for all sectors of the economy. 100%. The first industry group we went to was aviation to talk about that. But we're doing this in healthcare, we're doing it in energy, we're doing this in agriculture, transportation, and logistics across all the sectors of the Kansas economy, because that's really what's critical. So if you would, on my PowerPoint, turn to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th slide, where it says innovation ecosystem here. And this is really where our focus is. And I just spent a bunch of time here talking about growing the economy. And really, the key is, where are our industry partners? Who are we, as we graduate people? They're either going to go find jobs somewhere else, or we're going to bring companies here for them to take jobs here. So what are those industry partners we can have either increase their presence in Kansas or come to Kansas? And then number two, how do we train that workforce for them? One of the key pieces that I don't think we talk about enough when we're talking about economic development is infrastructure. And when Dr. Bardo came here and said the only reasons businesses are going to come is because it's cheaper to do business in place A than it is in place B. And you need to have the infrastructure. And quite honestly, and I think Senator Holland, you were talking about this a little earlier, attracting a business to come to Kansas and giving them money and saying, come to Kansas, not a bad thing. It creates jobs, but when they leave, that money goes with them. Because you've given them the money, they make the investments in infrastructure, that infrastructure leaves with them. If Kansas builds that infrastructure and Company A comes and Company A leaves, infrastructure's still there, Company B, Company C can come in as well. So really the focus is on infrastructure. The second piece is then, when you identify what that infrastructure is, what are those 7 clusters that we have in our state that we deal with? And what we have is aviation, advanced manufacturing and materials, IT, transportation, logistics, healthcare. I'm going to forget a couple. I have it on another page. But every one of those, when you meet with them and you ask them, what are your needs? They start with regulation and taxes. And then when you really get into what's happening, it's really not what their issue is. Their real issue is, where do we find the talent? And more importantly, what do we invest in? Because we've watched too many of our competitors and too many companies invest in technology they think is the future, and in 6 months it's outdated and nobody's using it. So it's a real scary opportunity moment for them to make those investments. And so how do we have that conversation of, hey, here's what's out there. Here are the programs and how we need to modify our programs. And I will tell you, at Wichita State, we've created more new programs in the last 3 years than we did in the previous 50, because the needs of industry are truly changing. The next piece is you need to have a talent pipeline. And I want to talk about the 2 areas that we are focusing on. One, Kansas has 2.9 million people, right? It's not enough to fill our talent pipeline that we currently have with people who are going to school. And I'm not talking about 4-year degrees. I'm talking about certificates. I'm talking about 2-year degrees. I'm talking about having the skill set to work. So where do we get that talent? We started the I-35 corridor to start looking at places that we do business with already to see if they would want to come to Kansas and go to school here. And we believe that if we had companies there on our campus and they worked for those companies, they would stay. So that's number one. Number two is, in Sedgwick County, about 17% of our population is between 25 and 35 and has a high school degree or less. It's about 17% of our population. Just extrapolating that across the state of Kansas, assuming that to be true for the entire state, it's about 500,000 people that are not thinking about going to school and getting the skill sets they need to participate in the new workforce. What would it take to have 5 or 10% of those go to school, and if we provide the supports to help them get through school, because they've never thought about going to school. So we talk about how hard it is to bring people into Kansas. What about that population that we have here that has never thought about going to school? And from our perspective, and you guys have been helping with that, is need-based aid, right? A lot of these families, you go to work and you help support the family, and there's not going to be any debt incurred by that family. That if we could make the cost of attendance cheaper for them, we could actually change their lives and their families' lives. So that's really the 2 areas we focus on in the talent pipeline. The last of the circles is Wichita State's applied learning. This is not an internship, it's not a co-op. Applied learning can be a co-op. You can do a co-op while you're working. You can do an internship, but it is, we go into an industry with a project manager, have a contract to do a book of work for them. We then hire students so they don't have to then go to do the work for that company in the area that we're talking about. The good news is for both the students and the company, a lot of time these companies hire students. They go through their HR process, and I don't know if you guys have to deal with companies and going through HR processes. Those are not fun and easy conversations. So now let's just say Andy Schlapp gets hired, goes to work, and he's not meeting the needs of that company. And that company goes, he's only going to be here 2 years. Just put him over here. He can do file cabinets. He can do, I'm not really learning anything while I'm there. And the company's afraid to do anything. In this model, the company can come to us and say, hey, Andy's not working out. Can we take Andy out? Can you bring somebody else in? We can take that as a learning lesson for that student, right? To say, okay, This didn't work out. Here's why. Here's the skill set. Here's the things you need. We're going to get you into another applied learning opportunity. And for the company now, we can put another person in there that will help be productive. So we feel it's a really great model. But more importantly, what's happening is in 2, 3, 4 years with these students working for these companies, even companies that have come in and said, we want to do this, but we're not hiring any of your students, end up hiring about 60 or 70% of them, right? Because once you fit the culture, once you've been trained by that company, they don't want to lose that asset, right? So that applied learning model really has made a difference in this, and I'm going to blow one of the later slides, but I'm spending a lot of time on this one. Of those students we brought in from Texas and Oklahoma, Colorado, Missouri, that have come in through the I-35, I-70 corridor, we were hoping to capture 20% of them when they graduated, right? 20% stay in Kansas. We think that's 20% more than we had. A lot of them will go home to where they're from, and now wherever they go to work, we can start to develop partnerships, and how do we trade with those companies they're with, and talk about further presence of those companies in Kansas. But that first graduating class we had, because of this applied learning, 49% of those students from outside of Kansas actually stayed in Kansas and took jobs with Kansas companies. So that's really where we think we've had success. I'm going to go back on the next slide, which is slide 6. I talk about infrastructure. And then if you go to the 7th slide, which is the one that looks like this. And basically what was stunning to me, I started talking about, because we're in Industry 4.0, there's been 4 industrial revolutions, all of these things, right? If you look at the first and second industrial revolution and the railroad coming through Kansas, here's what happened to Kansas. And it's stark and it's stunning, and to me, it says everything of why infrastructure is important. So you're moving people from the East Coast through the Midwest, and I'm from New York originally, and there's lots of trees and there's lots of rocks, and I lived in New Jersey, and it is farm country where I lived, and people don't believe that, and it's true. But you have to remove a lot of trees and a lot of rocks to get that field ready, right? I can't even imagine how hard that work was, and you don't have any machinery to do it. And now they're on a train, and they're coming through Kansas, and they're going, hey, no trees, no rocks. I can be farming and making money in a very short period of time if I come to Kansas, right? So look what happens to Kansas. We have really not very many people living here. The train comes in, and 3% of the US population is in Kansas by 1890, 3%. So infrastructure's in place. People see that infrastructure, realize they can make more money here than they can in other places, and people moved here. And since 1890, the population in Kansas has been decreasing every year since. Every year since. It doesn't mean we have less people, but as a percent of the US population, we have fewer people here today. Today it's 0.8, I think it's about 0.82, and it's declining faster than it's ever had. It doesn't mean more people aren't here, it just means we're not growing as fast as the rest of the country. And what I'm saying is agriculture is critical to this state, is still critical to this state, creates a lot of wealth in this state, but that infrastructure we had, the people we needed, that was met in 1890. I believe, and in the last census, you guys saw it, I believe 75 of the counties in Kansas saw their population in real numbers hike between 1890 and 1920. So just to get perspective of how important infrastructure is, and getting back to, if infrastructure is important, where do we make those investments?
And Andy, I want to make sure we have time
Yep.
for
Stop
some
anytime.
questions. So,
And you can invite me back.
well, we'll just block out next week for but let's go ahead and pause there for any quick questions, because I do want to let Andy get through all of his material. Any quick questions up to this point? Senator Holland.
Well, maybe a question, but I'm assuming, and don't get me wrong, so Andy, my background, I'm a small business entrepreneur. I've worked with a region school currently trying to bring our product to market. Please understand, I really appreciate, when we talk about these centers of excellence that we're establishing across. But here's my question for you. Who pays for this?
Pays for what?
This infrastructure, this new industry, this new technology, who pays for this?
Well, it's a combination, right? So you guys have invested money in there in the past. We have put our own dollars into that, but we also have a public-private partnership. So Deloitte, right? We rent the land to Deloitte, and Deloitte builds their building. And then we have a partnership with Deloitte. NetApp, again, they're making their own investment once they do a land lease with us. And what I will tell you is, we don't really want to be in the real estate game. What's important to us, if you locate on our campus, is that you use our students and you use our research.
Okay, my only point, sir, and not to cut you off, but just, and I will stand down, but where I'm going with this is that, you know, I appreciate, and I'm totally for economic development, but the taxpayers only have so much money. We've got to be laser focused and really, we got to really focus on where's the best bang for our buck. And my feeling about universities is that, you know, their mission has really changed over the past 200 years. And I want to be sure those universities are able to deliver students with the technical knowledge to step up to today's emerging, as well as the new. But quite honestly, I don't want to subsidize, particularly big business, okay, to build their pipelines of employers to help them build out their tech, okay? My feeling is that, you know, my thought is that the state ought to at least be providing the resources for you to develop, to acquire the professors, the peer researchers, okay? And then my thought is that then I'm entrusting you guys to get those scientists hook up with the big companies, and you guys find creative ways to start journeying that technology out, getting business formation, and not necessarily at the Kansas taxpayer dollar. And if that's an incorrect assumption, push back. But that's the way I see your guys' mission going forward.
So here's what I would say. I totally agree, right? I'm not here asking for money for the university. Okay. You will not hear me ask for more money for the university, right? We believe if what we're doing is the correct thing, we will grow and we will get additional revenue. What we're doing is partnering with business, and it's small business. And because the next slide that I was going to get to, every job that has been created in this country in the last 40 years is in technology, 100% of them. Great. All net new jobs, right? And the majority come from small business. So if we're not helping small and medium business be successful, we're making a huge mistake. So I guess what I'm saying to you is we are focused on that. I'm not here saying subsidize us, we're doing great stuff. We're trying to ask industry, and we do, we spend all our time, what do you need? How do we change our degree programs? Because I would agree with you. If we keep doing what we've always done, and here's the problem with business, yeah, it's kind of good what universities give us, it's not great, and we need to do all this other stuff. We're trying to jump that ladder to this other side to say, okay, what do you need and how do we do that?
Andy, I'm not saying you should be subsidizing small business. All I'm just trying to say is that as truly you are you help create jobs in this state. But for all businesses, but my point is that I want to be funding your research, but I don't want to be funding anything beyond helping somebody's. I think from that point, if you're going to be, if you have the true talent, businesses will recognize that, they will come, you will do deals. Okay. And I don't see I guess what I'm looking for is if there's additional arguments as far as why the state needs to subsidize portions of the life cycle beyond just being sure that we have the raw researcher, professor, classroom, instructional talent. You need to educate me on that more because I'm.
No, and I agree with that.
Okay,
So
we're going to let Andy respond, and then we're going to move on, so he can
all
finish.
I would say is, and I'm not here talking about subsidizing what we're doing or asking for money what we're doing. What I'm trying to do is just tell you what we are doing, because we believe at the end of the day, we need to make sure we're focusing on what industry needs and making sure Kansas grows. And so it's not an ask, and it's not that, hey, if we can't do it without money from the state, we're going to do it. It's the right thing to do. So that's where I'm coming from. Yeah.
Okay, please proceed. We want to make sure we get through your material, and we'll take questions at the end as time allows.
Well, and I'll just, here's where I'll end it. I just said all jobs, right? If we had to focus anywhere as a state, all new jobs are in technology. And when you talk to industry, and I've said this already, but what industry says is this is where we need to focus as well. What are in the research and development that we're talking about, if we have all these labs where people can come in and try new equipment, all these businesses can see what's out there, they can then say, okay, this is what we need to invest in to help our company. And more importantly, because we have students working in those labs, now there's where that workforce comes as well. So I'm going to the last slide of this. I'll get away from all of this, and it's our return on investment. These are all the labs we're doing and the focus. And so it's the slide that looks like this with these graphs here, right? So, and I've talked about this already. Paid applied learning, 8,000 students working with industry, with 600 different companies, making $28.5 million. Our research grant awards have grown from about 54 million in 2015 to today it's 270 million. And I think I just told you we just signed a new contract with the Army to deal with their ground transport. And again, this is about how do we take and digitize everything they're doing so that they can work in this future work world. And everybody's asking, where does this talent come from? How do we get our students working on those things that are going to be important to the future of the economy? Last on there, you'll see our total enrollment is about 22,000 students. That's with WSU and WSU Tech. And you can see that we have about 1,400 students coming from outside the state of Kansas. And like I said, 49% of them took jobs in Kansas. And I'll stop there and be glad to answer any more questions.
Questions from the committee? Yes, Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On slide number 10, it says all net new jobs in America since 1979 are in technology. When you put the word net in there, I guess I'm not 100% following exactly what that means, because I know many, for example, new mechanic shops, body shops have opened, and I realize there's some technology involved in that when I was doing body work in 1977, we didn't have the certain technology. So would that qualify as new technology?
So net new jobs, right? So we can talk about aviation because at least in my world, it's relevant. Boeing may hire 5,000 people. Spirit may lay off 5,000 people. Cessna may hire. When you take all of that, what's happening in this country, right, that averages out to say that's really not much growth, right? But if we look at technology, and this is from Steve Case's book that used to be at AOL, and it's also from the Kaufman that did this study as well. All new jobs are in technology. So that's the truth. There's more jobs in ag, but it's not somebody working the field. It's somebody doing some kind of technology to help improve what the output of an acre of farm land can do. Same with what you're talking about in the automobile area. It's all machines. It's all plugging in, talking to a computer chip and finding out what needs to happen. Those are the jobs. We just had a bank in Wichita double its footprint, and they're not hiring any finance people and bankers. It's all going to be computer people because computer are actually making most of the decisions for those banks because of that. So that's the key is none of these jobs go away, but the type of work they're going to be doing is going to be different than they did 20, 30, 40 years ago.
So those of us who are older, for example, need to get, I wasn't talking about you. I was talking about the chair.
Out of order, Senator. I knew it was coming. I was just waiting.
In any event, so it would behoove us, apparently, from what I'm hearing, to quit resisting learning technology. At my age, I'm not into technology. I don't really care. But if I'm going to survive in the future, it appears as though I'm going to have to, particularly if I retire from the legislature in the next 30 years or so. I may need a job in technology, but okay. Well, I guess that's important because Kansas is an aging population, for the aging population to realize that if you're going to change from one job to another, possibly lay off, possibly company shut down, you need to have some technological capabilities.
So, right at the end of the day, with what we're talking about is lifelong learning. That's where we're not talking about, hey, you go to school for 2 years or 4 years, you get a degree, and that's it, a little bit of training. It's lifelong learning, and it's going to be credentials, and we have what we call badge programs where you can go to school for a week or two, get a skill set in a certain area, and you can put a badge that says, hey, I learned this skill. And that's what we're working with industry, so you can start to accumulate those skill sets to make yourself more employable to people. But 100%, that's exactly what we need to do, is that older workforce needs to come back in and start dealing with what the technological needs of those jobs they've been doing for the last 40 years are.
Okay, thank you. And oh, I didn't realize it was you or the chair. I was thinking it was someone else. I apologize.
Too late, Senator Peck. Too late to recover on that one. Any other questions for Andy? Andy, thank you as always for being here, and appreciate the information. Committee, seeing no other business before us, we are adjourned.